All right, so first and foremost, if you want to be successful, you have to set yourself up for success. The infrastructure that you create for yourself and your team is going to allow you to scale. When you are doing multiple projects, more things can happen, more problems can occur. Welcome to the next episode of the Construction MF'ers. I'm 𝗨HI Peper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and today we are going to talk about the risks and the rewards of doing multiple projects at a time. Sometimes you schedule them out perfect, and then next thing you know, schedules get moved around, schedules get moved up, pushed back, and all of a sudden you have this perfect schedule all lined out for the year is now happening all at once. I know you've been there before. We're going to tackle today how you accomplish that, what you can do to make sure you still are successful even though that's going on. Conquering multiple projects at a time is definitely different than doing one at a time. And the complexities and the arrangements and the amount of labor, the amount of equipment, the amount of material, the sourcing of things, all of those complexities as you're growing your business or as your business is running at a normal pace but then changes, all things that I want to tackle here today to make sure that when you have multiple projects, and for example's sake, let's just say multiple projects is more projects than you're used to doing. So if you're a business that's normally accomplishing one project at a time, obviously doing 2 or 3 projects at one time is going to feel a lot different. Well, if you're a more mature business and you're doing 3 and 4 projects at a time, but all of a sudden a bunch flip to you and you're now doing 7 or 8 projects at a time, that's what I'm talking about for you. So there's some context, and now what we want to try to avoid is what are the things that you need to do to make sure that regardless of where your construction business is at, and regardless of the amount of projects you're doing at one time, that you can feel comfortable with the systems you have in place to make sure and ensure you are not only executing the work, focused on the performance, but also realizing the profit that you actually that you put into your bid so that you can make your money that you still want to do. Although you signed up the contract, you are obligated to perform the work. You don't want to lose money, okay? And even though schedules get pushed around, pushed back, moved up, you still have to make money on these jobs and you still need to execute them. So let's talk about that. All right, so first and foremost, if you want to be successful, you have to set yourself up for success. So I'm going to rewind myself back to things I talk about all the time, which are the systems and processes you have in place to execute work inside your business. Now, in a construction business, if you have a tried and true system for how you're going to bid work, estimate it, submit your bids, win the bids, buy the job out, set up the schedule, order materials, figure out and allocate your labor, put your overhead on top of that job, then finally execute it, invoice it, and get paid, you can lean on that system no matter how many projects you're doing. Now, of course, if you hit rewind 15 seconds and listen to all those things I just stated, and some of them you're doing and some of them you're not, that's the first place you have to start. The infrastructure that you create for yourself and your team is going to allow you to scale. Now, scaling for you may mean doing a couple projects at a time. You may say, I'm not trying to scale my business. Unfortunately, though, in this exact scenario, in a construction business, when you bid 6, 7, 8 jobs and you have 8 jobs on the schedule, and all of a sudden, instead of doing 2 at a time like you planned out perfectly, you now are doing 4 at a time. Whether you want to scale your business or not, unfortunately, it's going to feel like you're scaling your business when you're doing 4 projects at one time and you're only used to doing 2. Even if you end up with the same amount of revenue at the end of the year, it's still going to feel the same exact way. So how you can mitigate against that is creating the right structures in place for your project and how you're going to manage it. That starts with cash flow. If you know what the cash flow of every single project is, what those cash needs are going to be, how you've allocated them, where the costs are going to go out, which vendors you've chosen, which labor sources you're going to use, whether it's your direct labor, subcontract labor, the lead times, all of those things. When you map that cash flow out from the start of your job to when you're actually going to finish the job and be paid, you will then be able to utilize each one of those project schedules and the cash needs and then layer them on top of each other. So think of it like a spreadsheet. If each tab on the bottom had its own exact specific cash flow and each one of those job specific cash flows were built on the same system, you could easily merge those tabs into one summarized sheet that would let you know what you actually need from a business level across those projects as you manipulate and organize your way through the actual schedule and execution of them. So if you're not familiar with project cash flows, spreadsheets, Excel, and that's not your thing, there's a lot of ways to do this. But the bottom line is, if you manage each project piece by piece, even if you're just using simple pen and paper, you can add up what you need, when you need it, and how you need it. That's step one, and that's the most critical component, is having a system in place and understanding the cash flows of each project. Because regardless of when they start, you can always put them on top of each other and see how much money you're going to need. And then you can start to use your resources to make sure you can allocate the capital, the resources, human capital, equipment, suppliers, vendors, all of those things that you need on time and ready. Now, when you're executing multiple projects, there's certain risks that you're going to have to allocate and think about while you're managing these. Number one, when you are doing multiple projects, more things can happen. More problems can occur. More problems can occur at the same time. Doesn't mean you can't have lots of success at the same time either. It just means you're going to have to be paying attention to multiple things, and you're not going to be the only one that's able to do it. So if you're typically the person running your jobs, running your projects, and you have supervisors and project managers in place, maybe you're going to be spread a little thin. Maybe some of these managers and project managers, supervisors are going to have to be managing twice as many jobs or 3 times as many jobs. You may have to figure out a way for you to play a little bit different role. So you have to think about how you're going to allocate your managerial supervisors, project managers, to make sure that you can get the same level of information, the same quantity of information on each job in real time using the limited resources. Meaning, if you're used to doing 2 or 3 jobs at a time, projects at a time, and you have the managerial and supervisor for those jobs, and all of a sudden now you're doing 6, you can't just hire 2 or 3 new people and expect them to fall into your system. So you're going to have to lean on how you allocate your human capital, particularly your managers, on those jobs. That's step one. Step two is the cash flows. Get your accounting team, use outside resources. If this is a case where you're going to start to do 3, 4 jobs or twice as many jobs as you've done before, go to your accountants, grab those folks, tell them you're going to be doing these jobs in real time and you need some help. Have them model those jobs for you. If this isn't things that you can do internally, grab your managers and supervisors, bring them to or have your accountant come to your office, bring everybody in the meeting, have them speak and communicate exactly how these things are going to roll out, what the risks are, what you're thinking about, and have your accountant bring some resources that you can use from the outside to model these things for you so you can see, when are we going to order those materials? What's the timing of those going to be? Do I have enough cash? Can I order those when I normally do? A normal project manager, they're going to think, I'm going to order materials like I normally would. And if they're doing that for 2 or 3 jobs at a time, no problem. Well, now if they're doing it for 4 or 5 or 6 jobs at a time, and they're not communicating with each other because you have multiple projects going on, that's where you're going to run into some issues and how things can become a real problem. This is what you're trying to avoid. The way you do that, bring in external resources like professional accountants and the team that you have already using. Hopefully you already are using an accounting team that's specific to construction. So when you call them for something like this, it's easy for you to lean on them and leverage this opportunity. And by the way, these are the kind of calls that at your accounting firm love to get. Proactive, not reactive, calls to them on how they can help you with special projects. They have the resources for these things and they can utilize them. And if they don't, that's a sure sign of knowing that you don't have the right construction accounting firm. All right, so now you've allocated your cash flow, you've allocated your people, you've thought through those things. Now it's time to think as a team, where can problems occur? How can I mitigate these problems? If this happens, what are we going to do? If that happens, how are we going to handle it? Typically, unless you have a lot of access to capital or the owners can put money in, if you're going to do twice as many jobs at one time than you normally do, somewhere in the cash flow chain, you're going to have some struggles with capital and you're going to need extra cash. Now, the way that could come is simply working with your suppliers. You can negotiate with them in advance that maybe you need 60-day terms instead of 30-day terms, and you can show them why you're doing 4 or 5 projects at a time. Maybe it's going to come from your lines of credit or your bank. Maybe you can increase your lines of credit at your bank if you already have that. Or maybe you need an alternative form of capital like a mobilization funding or material financing or something else that you can use, that you can borrow from friends or family, whatever it may be. You want to start thinking about that in advance so you're not doing that under duress in a fire drill situation 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks out from now when you got all 4 of these jobs going at one time or whatever it may be. All right, now before I wrap it up, there's one other thing that I want to discuss with you guys as it relates to multiple projects. And it goes back to the very beginning of the conversation that I had, where I'm talking about the systems and the processes you have in place. One of the things I didn't talk about then, but I'm going to touch on now, is what are the terms that you have in your contract with your customers. It's really important, especially when you know that schedules can get pushed, things happen, multiple projects can get kicked off at the same time, that just bottom line, it's construction and schedules aren't always perfect. Well, knowing that in advance, you can get things into your contract that might help you mitigate against these kinds of stressors that can be put on the project or put on you. Because things like, well, if we don't start on time, I can put a change order in. Or if we get delayed, I can put a change order in. Or if projects are stopped midway, that I can be paid all the way through the contract value up till the point I was at, regardless of the delay. There's lots of things that in problem situations that you could get through on your contract, but you may not think to negotiate those. But if and when you are doing multiple projects at a time because of a schedule change, you're going to wish you had some of these terms changed. Now, the risk management across all of these jobs also has to be taken care of. You're taking on additional risk when you're doing these things outside the normal schedules that you've laid out. Now, that doesn't mean it's your customer's burden, doesn't mean that you're not grateful for the opportunity still. It just means you need to be able to manage that risk. Some of it can be handled inside the terms of your contract. Some of it can be handled with making sure you have access to capital from additional lenders or opportunities that you save cash and put it back into the business for yourself. There's different things that you can take care of. But having the tools, having the systems, and having these proactive thought processes and meetings with your team for what I consider normal things that happen all the time in the construction industry, you should be prepared for those, because normal things that can happen all the time, like schedules getting pushed, delays, and all of a sudden lots of projects starting at the same time, is a very, very normal thing. And if that very, very normal thing can also cause stress and problems for you that you have to manage, you should absolutely proactively have a plan on how you're going to handle those things and what stresses will come from that scenario. So, to reiterate, we're going back to the basics. If you want to start with a good system of how you're going to manage and account for each individual project, not only from a people perspective, a supplier, material, equipment, but also from a capital perspective, how are you going to finance it? If you have a good system for each and every project, then you will always be able to lean on that system no matter how many projects you try to pile on at the same time. Whether you're intentionally doing multiple projects and growing your business, or whether multiple projects get pushed and started and brought forward or pushed back, and all of a sudden you have multiple jobs starting at the same time. That feeling is going to be tough, and you want to make sure you're ready for it. And having good systems on how you handle project by project is going to allow you to build that infrastructure and layer and funnel on top of each other so you can see how you need to manage a business. And then have those meetings with your team. Leverage your professional services, whether it's your attorneys or your accountants like the examples I gave. Bring those services in proactively so that you can get real numbers. One thing I've learned being in this business and working with so many hundreds and hundreds of contractors across the last decade or more is that when contractors have the right information in front of them in real time, they can make the best decisions. The bad or poor decisions I see made that have bad outcomes, particularly when multiple projects are going on at the same time, are because of the absence of information, and then a decision's made. It's not because someone doesn't know what decision to make or they didn't know what they should do or want to do. It's because they didn't have the information available to them to make a good decision. When they have all that information, they make good decisions. They're able to navigate through what otherwise are very normal things in the construction industry, and they're able to persevere, execute the work, find their success, and keep everything running smooth. And that's what we want to do for you. If you like this video, if this has helped you, if anything at all has been helped and shared, please let us know. Click subscribe on our channel, share the video with your friends. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great week, and God bless you.